when I'm wrong, and I'm going to talk about it. And that's exactly what this video is. We got to talk about Toni Storm because what AEW is doing is actually really incredible stuff with Toni Storm. It is becoming one of my favorite parts of professional wrestling, not just in AEW, but also in WWE. And I was wrong. Now, granted, I wasn't really loud with this opinion. I wasn't really vocalizing it a lot, but I definitely mentioned publicly I was really confused with why Toni Storm's return was wasted on Rampage and Collision. And what's actually really amazing about this entire thing is if I was just a little bit more patient, which normally I am, but this is probably the second time I can recount where maybe I wasn't as patient. But if I was just patient, just a little bit longer, then I would have had my answers. If you guys don't know what I'm talking about, Toni Storm returned to AEW recently, but she's no longer timeless Toni Storm. Instead, she's back to like the punk rock version of herself that everybody knew prior to the timeless Toni Storm gimmick. And then they brought her back on Rampage, they brought her back on Collision, and then today on Dynamite, she does a backstage interview with RJ City and completely doesn't really like a newbie, like as if she never met him before, which is really funny because RJ City was very, very paramount in all of the timeless Toni Storm segments. But in this segment specifically, RJ City goes on and basically starts asking her if any of these names like ring a bell, right? And like he brings up, RJ City brings up, like Mariah May, for example, and she literally praises Mariah May as best in the business, just like a total fanboy type of thing or fangirl situation. There's no recount in history of like where she talks about her feud with Mariah May. So what's actually happening here is Toni Storm's new gimmick is being treated as a newbie. Like she is having like an identity crisis. Like ever since she lost her belt and ever since the timeless Toni Storm gimmick went away, she's not the same person anymore. And it's affected her completely on a mental scale. And that's why this is actually really, really good character development. And it's becoming one of my favorite stories because now it actually makes sense as to why she was booked on Rampage and why she was booked on Collision. Because she's basically talking about her journey to get to AEW as if she wasn't in AEW before. And that's obviously going to happen to somebody that's having a real identity crisis. And I got to give props to AEW here. Like, again, I wasn't super vocal about it. I wasn't one of those guys trashing it, but I definitely talked about it saying, hey, it just kind of, why would you waste such a big return for Rampage and Collision? It didn't make sense. But if you compare it to any other newbie that signs with AEW, going through this journey, they would be booked on Rampage and Collision. And Toni Storm is kind of like taking that role, which I find very fascinating. It's very entertaining, but really what this comes down to, and I got to give props to Toni Storm herself personally, just like on a personal level. I just think she is really, really good at wrestling, right? And there's a ton of people who are really good at wrestling. But there's also a ton of people who are really good at wrestling and then also really good at characters and stories and developing their promos. She gets it. She is very, very good at it. And it actually makes the storyline even better. Like it makes everything, because to me, in my opinion, I think the one thing I was more vocal about was why did they go away from the timeless gimmick, right? And again, I just wasn't as patient. That's my fault. That's my bad. I react to everything in real time. Sometimes, you're wrong. This is one of those cases. But I just feel like the timeless gimmick was just so damn good. Like it was really, really good stuff. It was really enjoyable to watch. Even if the other stuff in AEW wasn't as entertaining, I enjoyed watching those segments. So when I see that she came back not as timeless Toni Storm, I was like, damn. Is this one of those situations where AEW just doesn't understand the gold mine that they have in front of them? And that's where I was wrong, because clearly this character is an evolution of that. And I think it is just so much more enjoyable to watch. And again, a lot of credit has to go to her because she is just really skilled at this. I think there's a lot of people who looked at Toni Storm, especially when she was in WWE. They didn't necessarily understand her gimmick. They didn't understand what she could do with a gimmick. And then she comes to AEW. And this is where we actually get to see some of that. And this is why I think it's so good to have multiple wrestling companies out there. Every company is going to have successes and failures, but I genuinely love the fact that in AEW, she was able to find a character that is intriguing, especially when most of the show I would say there's not as many people with intriguing characters. That's not a knock towards AEW, but obviously they favor more of the wrestling skills than the character stuff, which is fine. It's okay. But for me, I've always been deeply interested in characters and watching people's characters develop over time. This is an example of where AEW is giving me exactly what I'm looking for. And again, that's the reason why I say, hey, I was wrong. Maybe I reacted a little too quickly. Now, there's been tons of other content creators who have been more vocal about it or yelling about it or whatever. I don't really get that way with professional wrestling. But the way I do get with professional wrestling is when I feel like something does cater to me, I feel even more as a fan. Not everything is going to cater to you. That's just how the world works, obviously. But as a fan, if you want to keep me hooked in, if you're bringing stuff that caters to me, then I tend to want to be even more interested. And I've just always been a fan of characters. It doesn't matter if it's professional wrestling or combat sports. I think people that always have the cool gimmicks and the people that have the cool characters and the trash talk and the promo skills and the aura and the presentation, like I just always have been drawn to that kind of stuff. And I feel like with AEW, they do have some pretty good characters, but this is one of those that is truly next level. I think this is definitely a top 3 character in all of professional wrestling right now. And there's some really good ones. So I definitely rank this very high. But I really want to just give props to AEW for what they're doing here. I don't know who's behind it. I don't know who's contributing to it. I don't know if somebody's running the promos or the segments, but I feel like AEW as of right now is hitting it out of the park. Now, I don't know where this goes long term, but thankfully this is so good. I'm intrigued. So I'm hoping as a fan of what I'm seeing, I'm hoping that AEW does have it planned long term. Because as of right now, this is some really cool stuff. Now, granted, it's December 18th at the time of this recording. Who knows what this is going to evolve into? But up until this point, I have to admit, this is like some really smart and really fun and really good booking. So I'm obviously really intrigued by that. And just really well done by AEW. I feel like right now, AEW is in a very pivotal time because the ratings aren't really there. The attendance is going down, and obviously that's going to happen. But the more and more exciting stuff that you could build on your show where people could get invested into long term, I think that will help rebuild their brand a little bit. It's not an easy task. It's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen in 1 month. It's not going to happen in 2 months. But if they apply some of the same methods that they're doing with Timeless Toni Storm across the entire shows, I think they can really rebound. Just really cool, man. Honestly, I thought this was really cool. Very well done, very well produced. And again, I'm gonna say it for the 3rd time. Toni Storm, just the ultimate professional. She just gets it. And I can't wait to see what this evolves into. So you guys let me know what you think in the comment section down below. When I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I was wrong about my reaction towards Cody giving up WrestleMania 40 to The Rock, right? I reacted very quickly, then they changed tune. Obviously I was pretty wrong about this stuff. So when I'm wrong, I'll admit it. But as a fan, I'm not even tripping. I think this is really cool. And as a wrestling fan, that's what makes it fun.